The slam of my own front door is still ringing in my ears as I sit here, hunched over in a shabby motel room that reeks of old cigarettes and the kind of hopelessness you can almost taste. Just 3 hours back, I was Ethan Vance, a guy with a good reputation as a senior accountant at Sterling and Associates, a devoted husband, and the proud owner of a charming colonial on Willow Drive. Now, I'm just a man with nowhere to go, accused of things I never did, watching my whole life unravel through the thin, faded curtains of room 237 at the Lakeside Motor Inn. Those red and blue police lights are still seared into my memory, flickering across Isabella's face, streaked with tears, as she pointed at me with a shaking hand and whispered words that shattered me. "He did this to me." My real name is Nathaniel Reed, and up until tonight, I thought I had myself all figured out, 42 years old, 15 years at Sterling and Associates, climbing the ladder from junior accountant all the way to the edge of senior partner. I always told my clients that numbers don't lie. Numbers are straightforward, honest, dependable, unlike people, as I'm starting to realize. I first crossed paths with Isabella Monroe 7 years ago at a charity gala downtown. She was helping out at the silent auction, her dark hair catching the light as she laughed at something her friend said. When she flashed me a smile from across that crowded ballroom, it was like the world suddenly snapped into focus for me. Back then, she was 28, working as a marketing coordinator for a local nonprofit, totally devoted to animal rescue and environmental work. Everything about her felt sincere, warm, and real. We dated for a couple of years before I finally asked her to marry me. Our wedding was just right, a small gathering in her parents' backyard, sunflowers everywhere, fairy lights strung up above us. Isabella wanted us to write our own vows, and when she promised to weather every storm with me, to be my safe place when life got rough, I believed her with everything I had. Honestly, I felt every word she said. Those first 5 years together were everything I'd hoped for. We bought that old colonial on Willow Drive, built in the 1920s, with its original hardwood floors and a wraparound porch where we'd sit every evening with our golden retriever, Max. Isabella would snuggle up next to me, her head resting on my shoulder, and we'd talk about our future, kids, fixing up the guest room, growing old together in that house. I put in long hours during tax season, but Isabella never once complained. She'd pack my lunches with little notes tucked inside, and sometimes she'd show up at the office with dinner when I was working late. When I got promoted to senior accountant 3 years ago, she threw a surprise party and gave this heartfelt speech about how proud she was to be married to the most hardworking, honest man she knew. Of course, our marriage wasn't flawless, whose is, really, but it was strong, built on trust, respect, and shared dreams. When Isabella changed jobs last year and started working as an events coordinator at Pinnacle Marketing, I was behind her all the way. When her new job meant late nights at client events, I picked up the slack at home, walking Max, doing the grocery runs, handling all the little things she used to take care of. I never doubted her, not for a second. The idea of her betraying me never even crossed my mind. Why would it? We were a team, partners in every sense, best friends who just happened to be married. When she told me she loved me, I took her at her word. When she promised we'd face everything together, I built my whole life around that promise. Max really completed our little family. We brought him home as a puppy from the rescue where Isabella used to spend her weekends volunteering. Watching her with that fluffy golden pup, seeing how gentle and loving she was, just confirmed everything I already felt about the woman I'd married. She'd sing to Max, take him on long strolls around the neighborhood, and fill her social media with endless photos of his goofy antics, always adding captions about how much she adored her boys. I honestly believed we were happy. I thought our foundation was rock solid. I was sure I knew who she was. But now, looking back, I can see the warning signs were there, just faint at first, like those tiny cracks in a wall you don't notice until the whole place starts to shift. It all began about 6 months ago, and it started with her phone. Isabella used to be so relaxed about it, leaving it lying around, even asking me to check her texts if she was in the shower, never secretive, never guarded. But slowly, that changed. She started carrying her phone everywhere, even into the bathroom, and began sleeping with it tucked under her pillow instead of leaving it on the nightstand. If I reached for it, maybe to show her a funny meme or a picture, she'd snatch it back with a quick laugh and some excuse about work privacy. Then her schedule started shifting, too. Suddenly, there were late meetings that dragged on until 9 or 10 at night, and weekend team-building events where I was never invited to meet her coworkers or even say hello. When I'd ask how her day went, her answers got shorter, more distracted. "Oh, just the usual client stuff, nothing special." She used to tell me everything, stories about tough clients, office gossip, funny moments with her team. Now, I got nothing but silence. Around the same time, I noticed she was pulling away physically. We'd always been affectionate, holding hands while watching TV, sneaking quick kisses in the kitchen, cuddling up together before bed. But Isabella started avoiding those little touches, finding reasons to stay up late on her laptop while I went to bed alone. If I tried to get close, she'd say she was too tired, too stressed, or just too busy with work. One night, when I told her I felt like we were turning into roommates instead of a married couple, she looked at me and said, "You're being clingy, Ethan. I just need some space to focus on my career right now. This promotion means a lot to me." So I stepped back. I gave her the space she asked for. I kept telling myself it was just a rough patch, that every marriage goes through times when work takes over. I threw myself into my own job, took on extra clients, and stayed late at the office to give her the breathing room she seemed to want. But then the little criticisms started creeping in, tiny remarks that stung more than I wanted to admit. They were small, but they added up over time. "Don't you think it's time to update your wardrobe? Some of those shirts are looking pretty old. Maybe we should skip dinner with the Millers. I don't think you really fit in with that group. I told my coworkers you're an accountant, and they all joked about how boring that must be." I didn't know what to say. She started making plans without me, girls' trips that were already booked before she even mentioned them, dinner parties at our place where she'd handle all the invites and then just let me know we'd be hosting a dozen people on Saturday. If I suggested something for us to do together, she'd always have a reason it wouldn't work: too expensive, too far, too crowded, or just not interesting enough. Even the house started to feel different. Isabella used to take so much pride in our home, but she stopped caring about the little things that used to matter to her. Dishes would pile up in the sink, laundry would sit unfolded for days, and she'd order takeout instead of cooking the meals we used to make together. When I picked up the slack, she didn't thank me, she just acted like it was my job now, like the chores had always been my responsibility. Even Max could sense something was off. Dogs have a way of picking up on things people try to hide. Max started sticking close to me instead of following Isabella around, curling up by my feet at dinner instead of waiting for scraps at her chair. When she did give him attention, it felt forced, almost like she was acting for someone who wasn't even there. But what really hit me was how she stopped talking about our future. Those long evening chats about having kids, fixing up the house, or what we'd do when we retired, they just faded away. Anytime I tried to bring up anything down the road, she'd dodge the topic or give me vague answers like, "We'll see," or "Maybe someday," or "Let's just focus on now." Still, I kept making excuses for her. I told myself marriage isn't always easy. People change, life gets complicated. Maybe she was just under some pressure I didn't get. Maybe I needed to be more patient, more supportive, more understanding. Looking back, the weird stuff with our finances should have been my wake-up call. I started noticing credit card charges I couldn't place, fancy dinners at places we'd never gone together, shopping at stores she swore she'd never set foot in. When I asked her about it, she always had a story that sounded reasonable enough: client dinners, gifts for coworkers, business expenses she'd get reimbursed for. But the bills kept getting bigger, and her explanations got more and more complicated. I needed a new dress for the Carmichael account presentation. First impressions matter in my line of work. The team went out to celebrate closing the Beaumont deal, and since I was the lead, it was on me to pick up the tab. Chloe's having a rough time with her divorce, so I took her shopping to cheer her up. She'll pay me back once her settlement comes through. I wanted to trust her. I had to, because the idea that the woman I'd built my whole life around was lying to me on purpose was just too much to handle. The last straw in this slow-motion train wreck happened a couple weeks ago. I'd taken the afternoon off for a dentist appointment and thought I'd surprise Isabella with lunch at her office, something I used to do back when things were good, and she'd always light up when she saw me. But when I walked into the Pinnacle marketing lobby with a bag from her favorite Thai place, the receptionist just looked puzzled. "Oh, Mr. Vance, Isabella's not here today. Didn't she mention she took the day off for a personal appointment?" My stomach dropped. That morning, she'd left in her work clothes, kissed me goodbye, and told me she had meetings all day and wouldn't be home until late. I just stood there, holding that bag of pad thai, feeling like a fool, mumbling something to the receptionist about a mix-up in our schedules. I drove home in a fog, the food getting cold on the seat next to me. When I got back to the house, it felt off, like someone had been there who didn't belong. Nothing was obviously out of place, but the air felt wrong. Max was restless, pacing by the door and whining in a way I'd never seen before. That night, Isabella came home around 10:30, looking worn out and claiming she'd had the most insane day ever. I almost asked her about it right then. The words were on the tip of my tongue. But she looked so tired, so stressed, and once again, I found myself making excuses for her. Maybe she'd had a last-minute client emergency. Maybe she'd been called out and forgot to tell me. Maybe the receptionist just got confused. But deep down, I knew the truth. The marriage I'd been trying so hard to hold on to was already gone. I just wasn't ready to face it yet. The moment everything snapped into focus for me happened on a Tuesday night in late October. I remember the exact date, October 24th, because that's when my old life officially ended and this whole nightmare kicked off. I'd been burning the midnight oil at work, trying to wrap up quarterly reports for 3 different clients before the end of the month. The office was dead quiet, just me and the cleaning crew left. Around 9:30, it hit me that I'd left my backup hard drive at home, and I needed those sterling files, weeks of work I couldn't afford to lose. I tried calling Isabella to let her know I'd be swinging by the house, but her phone went straight to voicemail. No big deal, I thought. She'd told me she was having dinner with her sister that night, and Lily's place is notorious for spotty cell service. I drove through the empty suburban streets, my mind racing through the tasks I still had to finish. When I pulled into our driveway, the house was dark, which made sense if Isabella wasn't home yet. But as I fumbled for my keys at the front door, I heard something that made my blood run cold: laughter. A man's laughter, coming from inside my own house. Then I heard Isabella's voice, sounding lighter and more alive than I'd heard in months. "Oh God, you're terrible. What if someone sees us?" More laughter followed, then footsteps upstairs. Our bedroom. I just stood there on the porch, my key halfway to the lock, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. Maybe it was just the TV, I told myself. Maybe she'd come home early and was watching a movie. But then I heard her voice, clear as day, drifting down from the bedroom window. "Ethan never touches me like that anymore." And then a man's voice, his loss. "You're incredible, baby." My key slipped from my hand and hit the porch with a clatter. Right then, standing in the dark outside the home we'd built together, listening to my wife betray me with such casual cruelty, something inside me just broke. It wasn't just my heart, though that was shattered beyond repair, it was something deeper. My faith in people, my belief that love actually meant something, my trust in my own judgment. With shaking hands, I picked up the key and let myself into my own house, feeling like a burglar. Max came bounding down the stairs to greet me, tail wagging, completely unaware of the disaster happening upstairs. I knelt down and scratched his ears, my hands numb, while the sounds from above confirmed every fear I'd been trying to ignore for months. I could have charged up those stairs, kicked open the bedroom door, and demanded answers, but something cold and logical took over. Standing there in the living room, surrounded by photos of our life together, listening to Isabella mock our marriage with her lover, I realized that losing my temper would only make things worse for me. So instead, I pulled out my phone and started recording. The audio was crystal clear, every word, every laugh, every intimate sound that left no doubt about what was happening in my own bedroom. I made sure to document the time and date, even snapped a few photos of the unfamiliar car parked a little ways down the street. After 20 minutes of gathering proof, I slipped out of my own house as quietly as I'd come in and drove back to the office. I finished those sterling reports in a kind of focused rage, letting the numbers and spreadsheets be the only solid ground I had left in a world that suddenly felt like it was built on quicksand. That night, I lay awake in the guest room, while Isabella slept soundly next to her lover in our bed. And that's when I made up my mind. I wasn't going to let myself be the victim in this story. I wasn't going to be the guy who got blindsided and destroyed by someone else's lies and selfishness. I was going to fight back, but I was going to do it the smart way. The following morning, Isabella came downstairs humming to herself, acting like it was just another ordinary day. She started making coffee, moving around the kitchen as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. She leaned in and kissed me on the cheek, the same spot she'd kissed the day before, right before lying about her dinner plans, and then asked about my late night at work. "How'd the reports go? You looked wiped out when you finally came to bed." The thing is, I'd actually slept in the guest room, but I guess she was too wrapped up in her own world to notice. I played along, watching her with a new perspective. I had to admit, she was convincing, could have won an Oscar for her performance as the caring wife, the supportive partner, the woman who definitely hadn't just spent the night with another man in our bed. "Fine," I told her, taking a sip of coffee that tasted like nothing but ashes. "Just the usual deadline stress." Over the next week, I started putting together my counterattack with the same careful attention to detail I used in forensic accounting. I wasn't about to have some emotional blow-up or a messy confrontation. No, I was going to be methodical, thorough, and make sure the fallout landed squarely on her. First, I needed more proof. The audio recording was damning, but I wanted the full picture. I set up discrete monitoring software on our home network, tracking every device and every bit of data that came and went. I also hired a private investigator, Thomas Archer, a former cop who'd made a name for himself catching cheaters. He wasn't cheap, but he was good. Within 2 weeks, Thomas had mapped out a whole web of lies that stretched back half a year. Isabella was having an affair with Grant Ellison, the creative director at Pinnacle Marketing. Grant was 35, divorced, and drove a flashy red BMW convertible, the same one I'd seen parked down the street that night. They'd been meeting up at his place, at hotels, and sometimes even at our house when they thought I was stuck at work. But the cheating was just the tip of the iceberg. What Thomas uncovered next was way worse. Isabella and Grant were plotting to ruin me completely. She'd been fabricating evidence for months, building a fake story of domestic abuse, photos of bruises she'd given herself, screenshots of text messages she'd sent to friends about my so-called violent outbursts, and a journal packed with made-up stories about fights that never happened, threats I never made, and violence I couldn't even imagine. She was setting me up, not just to leave me, but to frame me as an abuser. Her goal wasn't just divorce, she wanted to wipe me out. She wanted the house, the savings, Max, and my reputation in the gutter. She wanted me out of a job, out of friends, and maybe even behind bars. The whole scheme was almost impressive in how cold and calculated it was. The plan was to stage a domestic violence incident, call the cops, and have me arrested while I was tangled up in the legal system, fighting charges that were pure fiction. She'd drain our accounts, file for divorce with her fake evidence, and start her new life with Grant. By the time I could clear my name, if that was even possible, she'd have everything, and I'd be left with nothing. According to Thomas's surveillance, they were planning to pull the trigger on this plan within the next 2 weeks. So, I decided to get ahead of them. The best part about my plan was how simple it was. Isabella had handed me everything I needed to take her down, her fake evidence, her lies, her carefully crafted deception. All of it would become proof of her fraud, not my supposed abuse. First, I made sure our assets were protected. With help from a lawyer Thomas recommended, Rachel Whitman, a family law attorney known for playing hardball, I quietly moved half of our joint savings into a separate account. I documented every shared asset, every piece of property, every financial detail from our marriage. When things finally blew up, I wanted to have rock-solid proof of what belonged to who. After that, I set up my own surveillance system, high-def cameras tucked away in key spots around the house, all streaming straight to cloud storage that Isabella couldn't touch or erase. I hid audio recorders in the main rooms, too. If she was going to try and stage some kind of scene, I was going to have every second of it on tape. The hardest part was the waiting, pretending everything was fine while I knew exactly what she was up to, kissing her goodnight while she schemed against me, walking Max through the neighborhood while she texted her boyfriend about how soon they could start their new life together. But I didn't have to wait long. November 15th is a date I'll never be able to forget. That's when everything finally blew up. I came home from work and found Isabella pacing the kitchen, clearly on edge. Max was nowhere to be seen, he'd gone upstairs to hide. She'd been drinking, which was rare for her on a weeknight. "We need to talk," she said, and the way she said it made every instinct in me go on high alert. "All right," I replied, keeping my voice steady as I reached for my phone and hit record. "What's going on?" What happened next was like something out of a play. Isabella launched into this well-rehearsed speech about how things had changed between us, how she didn't feel safe anymore, how my so-called anger issues were getting worse. She started tossing around words like controlling and intimidating, spinning the same story I'd seen in her fake journal entries. I let her talk, kept my cool, never raised my voice, and didn't take the bait when she tried to get a rise out of me. Every word was being recorded. Every lie was being documented. Then she took it up a notch. "I can't do this anymore, Ethan. I'm scared of you. Last week, when you grabbed my arm, I've never grabbed your arm, Isabella." "Yes, you did. And you're getting angry right now, just like, I'm not angry. I'm just confused. When exactly did I grab your arm?" She started stumbling over her story, contradicting herself, getting more and more flustered as her acts started to unravel. This wasn't how she'd planned it. I was supposed to lose my temper, to yell, to give her the reaction she needed to justify her next move. Instead, I stayed calm, asked her to clarify, treated her accusations like I would any accounting error, something to be sorted out with facts and logic. That's when she lost it. Isabella grabbed a kitchen knife, not to threaten me, but to cut her own arm, just a shallow slice that started bleeding right away. Then she slammed herself into the fridge hard enough to leave a bruise, threw herself on the floor, and started screaming, "Help! Someone help me! He's going to kill me!" I just stood there, stunned, watching my wife hurt herself to set me up for domestic violence, all while my hidden cameras caught every second of her act. She was all in, sobbing, screaming for help, begging the neighbors to call 911, pleading for her life from a man who hadn't even moved from his spot. The cops showed up within minutes. Sure enough, the neighbors had called 911 after hearing her screams. I ended up handcuffed in my own living room while Isabella put on the performance of a lifetime, blood on her arm, bruises on her back, tears streaming down her face as she told the officers I was a monster who'd finally snapped. "I knew this day would come," she sobbed. "I've been trying to leave him, but he threatened to kill me if I ever tried. Tonight, he lost control. I thought he was going to murder me. They arrested me, charged me with domestic assault, and I spent the night in county lockup. The next morning, a restraining order was slapped on me. I was banned from my own house, suspended from work while they investigated, and suddenly I was the talk of the neighborhood and the subject of local news. But unlike the helpless victim Isabella thought I'd be, I wasn't out of options. The following morning, while Isabella was probably celebrating with Grant in what used to be my bedroom, I found myself sitting across from Rachel Whitman in her office, clutching a flash drive packed with evidence that would turn everything upside down. Rachel watched the surveillance footage of Isabella's self-inflicted wounds and her dramatic meltdown, shaking her head in disbelief. "This is incredible," she said, her voice low and serious. "I've seen people make false domestic violence claims before, but I've never come across something this calculated and elaborate. We had it all: crystal clear video of Isabella cutting herself and slamming into the fridge, audio of her admitting she'd made up the abuse, financial records showing she'd been plotting to drain our accounts, proof of her 6-month affair with Grant, and screenshots of texts between them where they mapped out their plan to frame me. But the real clincher was something Thomas had dug up through his surveillance work, a recording of Isabella bragging to her friend Natalie at their favorite wine bar. You should have seen his face when they cuffed him," she laughed, swirling her glass. "He had no clue what hit him. By the time he figures it out, Grant and I will be long gone with everything, his house, his money, even that dumb dog he loves so much." Natalie hadn't been comfortable with any of it. After Thomas approached her and explained what was really going on, she was horrified. She handed over her own recordings, conversations where Isabella spelled out her whole scheme, admitted to cheating, and even gloated about tearing my life apart. With all this evidence in hand, Rachel wasted no time. She filed an emergency motion to get all the charges against me dropped and to countersue Isabella for false reporting, defamation, fraud, and malicious prosecution. The family court judge, Judge Carter, had a reputation for cutting through nonsense. When she looked over our mountain of evidence, her response was immediate and firm. "This is one of the worst abuses of the legal system I've ever seen," Judge Carter said from the bench. "Miss Thorne has twisted domestic violence laws to commit fraud, filed false police reports, and tried to ruin an innocent man's life for her own gain. This court will not stand for such a blatant miscarriage of justice." The restraining order was thrown out on the spot. Every domestic violence charge was dismissed with prejudice. I got my job back, along with all my back pay and a formal apology from HR. But that was just the start of Isabella's downfall. The divorce was quick and ruthless. With all the evidence of her lies and cheating, Isabella lost everything. I kept the house, the savings, all our shared assets, and full custody of Max. She was ordered to pay me back for legal fees, damages for defamation, and the wages I lost while I was suspended. Then came the criminal charges. Isabella was arrested for filing false police reports, insurance fraud, and attempted extortion. The prosecutor, armed with the video of her faking the whole thing, went after her hard. She ended up pleading guilty to avoid a trial and got 2 years in prison, plus 3 years of probation. But honestly, the legal punishment was just the beginning of her unraveling. The story exploded online. Local news ran with the story of the fake domestic violence case, and the footage of Isabella cutting herself became a viral warning about false accusations. Her name was suddenly everywhere, tied to legal fraud and deception. Pinnacle Marketing fired her the moment she was arrested, saying her actions went against everything the company stood for. Her career was over. No marketing firm wanted anything to do with someone whose name was now shorthand for high-profile lies. Word spread fast in the industry, and it didn't take long for the gossip mill to make sure Isabella would never work in marketing again. As for Grant, her so-called soulmate and partner in crime, he bailed the second the scandal hit the news. Faced with the threat of being charged as an accessory, he lawyered up and quickly turned on Isabella, testifying against her in exchange for immunity. Their big love story fell apart the moment real consequences showed up. Her social life vanished overnight. Friends who'd once believed her sob story felt duped and angry when the truth came out. Former co-workers who'd rallied around her during her crisis made a point of distancing themselves. Even her own family struggled to come to terms with the fact that their daughter had masterminded such a twisted scheme. Financially, she was wiped out. Between the legal bills, court-ordered restitution, and not being able to land a steady job, Isabella lost everything. She ended up in a shabby apartment in the roughest part of town, working minimum-wage retail jobs while most of her paycheck got swallowed up by garnishments to pay off her debts. Now, 6 months later, I'm sitting here in my study, well, our study, but Max has pretty much claimed the leather chair by the window as his own, writing down how justice finally caught up with her. The house feels peaceful again, like all the bad energy from those last months of my marriage has finally cleared out. Work's never been better. The partners at Sterling and Associates were impressed with how I handled everything, and if anything, my reputation for honesty and resilience only grew. Clients respect a guy who keeps his head when things get tough, who stands up for himself with brains instead of just emotion. I made senior partner 3 months ago. All those home renovations Isabella and I used to talk about are finally happening, but now it's just my vision guiding things. I turned her old office into a library, put a gym in the basement, and built a master suite that doesn't have a single memory of her betrayal. Max is loving the new dog run I built out back. I've even started dating again, slowly, carefully, but with a sense of hope. There's something freeing about knowing what warning signs to look for, about realizing that trust isn't something you just hand out, it's something people have to earn. This whole ordeal made me tougher, wiser, and a lot more careful about who I let into my life. But honestly, the real victory isn't just my own success, it's watching Isabella face the full consequences of what she did. She tried to use the legal system to destroy me, but in the end, she only managed to ruin herself. Every lie she told became evidence against her. Every false accusation turned into another reason for her to pay restitution. Every second of her little act became proof of her guilt. Sometimes, I drive past her apartment on my way to the nice restaurants and shops she can't afford anymore. The place is a concrete dump in a neighborhood where sirens are just part of the background noise. Her car, when it's running, is the same old beat-up Honda she drove back in college, a far cry from the fancy cars she used to love. She tried reaching out once, about 3 months after she got out of prison, a sad little letter where she admitted to making mistakes and begged for forgiveness, wanted a chance to explain. I tossed it in the fireplace without even reading the whole thing. Some betrayals are just too big to forgive. The best part is knowing she has to live with the fallout of her choices every single day. She can't shake her reputation, can't hide from the internet trail of her fraud, can't rebuild relationships with people who know exactly what she's capable of. She built her own prison, and now she's stuck serving that sentence for the rest of her life. Grant didn't crash and burn quite as hard as Isabella, but he didn't exactly come out smelling like roses either. His career managed to limp along, but his reputation in the business is shot for good. Now, he's the guy who helped stage a fake domestic violence case, the one who sold out a coworker's husband for a shot at sex and a little extra cash. In this line of work, trust is everything, and nobody in the industry trusts Grant Ellison anymore. As for me, I'm finally free from a marriage that was slowly poisoning me, free from someone who saw me as nothing more than a bank account to be drained and tossed aside, free to build a life that's honest and real, surrounded by people who actually care about integrity. The golden retriever curled up at my feet right now is more loyal than the woman I married ever was. Max never lied to me, never schemed behind my back, never tried to ruin my life for his own gain. He's better company than Isabella ever managed to be, and a whole lot cheaper to keep happy. Every now and then, people ask if I feel any guilt about how completely Isabella's life fell apart, if I regret how thorough I was in making sure she faced the consequences, or if I have any sympathy for how far she's fallen. The truth is, I don't. She brought every bit of this on herself. She made the choice to twist domestic violence laws to hurt an innocent man. She chose to lie, to manipulate, to plot and scheme. She tried to send me to prison for things I never did. Every single consequence she's dealing with now is the result of her own actions, her own decisions, her own cruelty. I didn't destroy Isabella's life, she did that all by herself, one lie at a time. I just made sure she couldn't drag me down with her. Justice doesn't always come quickly, but when it finally arrives, it's final. And seeing someone who tried to ruin you get exactly what they deserve, that's not revenge. That's poetry. So, if you've made it this far, I'd love to hear what you think. Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.